Scandal and controversy has been associated with every religion, but it seems like the tea just keeps spilling from the Vatican. The walls of this powerful city have kept a lot hidden from the world, but some stories still squirm their way out and wreak havoc around the globe. The Vatican City is an ecclesiastical state famous for being the seat of the Roman Catholic Church. It is an enclave inside Rome and is situated on the west bank of the Tiber River. If you look at a map of Rome, you'd be surprised there's a tiny little country within this extraordinary city. It's the home of the Holy See and is also the world's smallest entirely independent nation-state. The Vatican covers only a meager area of 49 hectares, and its total population is 453 people. This formidable historic and spiritual city is as powerful as it is sacred, and no one should underestimate the influence of the Vatican despite its incredibly small size and population. For a while now, the world has been suspecting that behind all that extravagance, power, and influence, there's something sinister. The Vatican has been sitting on a treasure trove of dark secrets that are slowly beginning to reveal themselves. There have been many unsettling incidents in the nation's past that need to be addressed. Today, we're going to tell you all about the terrifying secrets this splendid and prestigious nation is hiding, so make sure you stick around until the end. Number 1. Trial of the Dead. One of the strangest trials in human history was carried out in the Vatican. It's an incident that proved how eccentric and petty some religious figures can be. The trial is called Cadaver Synod. It was an ecclesiastical trial conducted by the Basilica of St. John Lateran, and the person who was tried was no ordinary man. It was Pope Formosus in the year 897. The Pope Stephen VI, who became Pope after Formosus, proposed the trial. This was an uncertain period in the city's long and glorious history. A rapid succession in pontiffs occurred during this time. Just between 872 and 996, more than 20 popes were appointed. Pope Formosus had been accused of perjury, illegal accession to papacy, and he was also accused of ruling over 2 places at one time. But these accusations weren't made when he was the pope. In fact, these came nearly 7 months after his death. On orders of Pope Stephen VI, Formosus's body was exhumed from the tomb and was brought to the papal courts and was propped up on a throne. Because dead people could not speak for themselves, a deacon would be appointed to do so for him. As expected, Formosus was deemed guilty. His body was stripped of its papal vestments, and the 3 fingers of the right hand that Formosus used for blessings were cut off by Stephen himself. The acts of the ordination by the dead pope were also invalidated. His body was then reburied in a graveyard for foreigners, but even that did not satisfy Stephen, who had the body dug up again and then thrown into the Tiber River with weight tied to it. Many believe that this was just revenge that was served cold by Pope Stephen, who was unhappy with Formosus as he invited Arnulf of Carinthia to become emperor and betrayed Lambert of Spoleto. Some people later reported that the body of Pope Formosus washed up on the banks of the river, and the Roman population was not happy with this vengeful and downright petty trial, and they turned against Pope Stephen. Soon a public uprising erupted and Stephen was imprisoned. Later in the year 897, he was then strangled to death. Number 2. Exorcist Army. Science and psychology can say whatever they want. The Roman Catholic Church has a mind of its own. Most of us know exorcisms from horror movies like The Conjuring, but it was in fact a very common ritual performed during the Middle Ages. At that time, people were not aware of psychiatric diseases, nor did they understand the concept of mental well-being. But believe it or not, the tradition is still alive in this age of advanced neuroscience and psychology. The Catholic Church is an open and adamant supporter and practitioner of exorcisms even today. The former chief exorcist, Father Gabriel Amorth, passed away in 2016, and it's reported that he alone performed around 130,000 exorcisms in his lifetime. Back in 2018, BBC reported that Vatican City welcomed about 250 priests to attend the annual exorcism school. The church actually thinks demonic possessions have markedly increased over the past few years, and Pope Francis himself advised people to seek out exorcists if they were suffering from spiritual disturbances. Some people think Pope Francis performs exorcisms as well. Back in 2013, there was a rumor that he performed one in public on a man in a wheelchair. Exorcisms are considered sensationalized and abusive, but that doesn't stop the church from performing them. The popes have carried out many exorcisms in the previous decade. Father Amorth narrated an account of Pope John Paul II, who attempted driving a demon out of a woman. She had been brought to him screaming like a maniac as drool came out of her mouth. The Pope was not successful in freeing her from the vile demon, so Father Amorth had to step in and finish the job. According to Amorth, he saw the woman walking up the wall as if gravity didn't exist. The church truly doesn't care what the world or even science thinks. They've carried out hundreds of thousands of exorcisms and plan to carry on with these in the future. Number 3. Secrets of Fatima. The sensational story about 3 secrets of Fatima came to light in 1970. These aren't secrets anymore, as the entire world knows about them, but the Vatican still doesn't have much to say about these apocalyptic visions and prophecies. Of these, the 3rd secret has received significantly more attention by the Catholic masses. These secrets were actually prophecies blessed to 3 young Portuguese shepherds. It's reported that these were revealed by a Marian apparition who is now called Our Lady of Fatima. Lucia Santos and her cousins Jacinta and Francisco were the 3 young Portuguese shepherds who reported being visited by the Virgin Mary a total of 6 times between May and October of 1917. Among them, Lucia was the one who revealed these secrets to everyone when the local bishop advised her to do so. People were not immediately convinced of these as there was no proof. However, in October of 1917, when the final apparition of Fatima occurred, the Virgin Mary performed a sun dance. This was witnessed by everyone present, which included news reporters who wrote many articles about this strange event in the papers. The children were actually supposed to keep these prophecies a secret, but after almost 20 years, Lucia decided to write down the first 2 secrets. She still had doubts about revealing the 3rd one, but the bishop convinced her to do so. The first secret was somewhat like a vision of hell. She then wrote that all 3 children were blessed with the vision of hell by the Virgin Mary. They saw suffering souls, and their condition was so pitiful that they had a hard time looking at them. The second secret was a vision, or more like a premonition, about the First World War. The children were shown how the war would end, only to be followed by another war. The 3rd secret is the most unsettling, and it wasn't revealed with the first 2. In fact, Lucia wrote it down on a piece of paper and placed it inside of a sealed envelope. She then instructed that this was not to be opened before the year 1960. The letter was then opened in 1960, but its contents were only seen by a selective audience and were kept hidden from the public until the year 2000. The 3rd secret is a vision of the 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. The prophecy describes the bishop wearing a white dress as he makes his way towards a cross. He's then seen struggling to get to it as corpses of many thousands of martyrs surround him. But after he reaches the cross that's installed on the top of a mountain, he's killed by bullets and arrows. 2 angels standing under each arm of the cross are also described. This, however, may not be the entire 3rd secret, as many people believe that all of the contents of this letter from Lucia were not made public, and the Vatican is still keeping it a secret. Number 4. Vatican and Nazis. Another one of the Vatican's dirty secrets is their involvement with the Nazis. It's no secret that the Vatican just silently stood by and watched as Hitler and his Nazi army committed inhumane crimes and atrocities during the Second World War. They completely disregarded the persecution of Jews under the oppressive regime. But when the Second World War ended and the Nazis would be defeated, the Vatican also provided thousands of war criminals and Nazi soldiers safe passage. These soldiers fled to South America through passages that are now called the rat lines. It was not an entirely organized system, but instead was a kind of collaboration in which multiple institutions took part in helping the Nazis flee and avoid accountability after the war was over. Thousands of Nazi soldiers would flee Europe with the Catholic Church's help, and some notable names included Franz Stangl, the perpetrator of mass murder in concentration camps, Adolf Eichmann, Joseph Mengele, Klaus Barbie, Walter Rauff, and more. A Harvard researcher named Gerald Steinecker wrote his book that many Red Cross members had a soft corner for the Nazis, and they provided them travel documents to escape. The Vatican aided many Nazi fugitives despite knowing the brutalities committed by them. The documents related to this Nazi-saving mission are still hidden in the Vatican archives. However, researchers are still trying to gain access to these records. Number 5. Rwandan Tragedy. Back in 2017, Pope Francis made news by officially offering an apology to the victims of the infamous Rwandan genocide. Despite trying to suppress the secret, the Vatican was unable to avoid accountability for this. It's a known fact that many members of the Catholic Church took part in ethnic cleansing in Rwanda in 1994. Instead of attempting to save the victimized Tutsi ethnic group, the priests, nuns, and other clergy members only made things worse for them. More than 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus were murdered by extremists between April and June of 1994. The Rwandan president at the time triggered this violence. He was a Hutu, and when his plane would be shot down, the national media and the presidential guard began the propaganda against the Tutsis. Citizens and others both killed the poor Tutsis, and in fact, many Hutus were forced to kill their Tutsi friends and neighbors. Thousands of them sought refuge in churches, but were murdered by the assistance of clergy members. In August of 1994, around 5,000 people were murdered at one Catholic church, and another priest named Father Athanasi Saramba ordered his church to be bulldozed with 2,000 Tutsi refugees locked inside. And another priest would be charged by the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda for drafting lists of Tutsi people for the killing. Experts believe the church was partial to the wrong ruling of Hutus and supported them in the genocide. Number 6. Satan's Spell Book. Amongst Vatican's hundreds of thousands of secret archives, there is a sinister and downright scary book that they don't want anyone to access. It's considered the most dangerous book of spells in human history. The name of the book is Le Grand Grimoire, and it was written around 1520. The author of this frightening book was an apocryphal figure named Honorius of Thebes. Many believe that the man was possessed by Satan. The book is written in Biblical Hebrew or Aramaic and was discovered in the tomb of King Solomon in 1750. According to legend, this book is also called the Red Dragon. It's one of the most powerful occult books in the entire world, and there are even instructions on how to craft magical talismans, amulets, ways to conjure spells that will make you win lotteries, and also many ways to communicate with the spirits of the dead and demons. But the most terrifying spell in this historic book is the method to summon Lucifer himself. There are instructions on how you can make a deal with him. There are many copies of the nefarious book out there, but experts think that these are either fake or modified, so the spells in them do not work. But the believers think even these versions have some sort of power and influence. The original manuscript, however, owned by the Catholic Church, and besides them, no one knows its whereabouts. Number 7. Vati Leaks. Also called the Vatican Leaks, this scandal would take the world by storm. It's almost like WikiLeaks, but for the greatest church in the world. Back in 2012, many documents exposing some terrible accounts of corruption in the Vatican would be leaked to the public. It all began with a television show called The Untouchables. This was followed by a book titled His Holiness, The Secret Papers of Benedict XVI. It was written by a man who exposed some pretty controversial and confidential information. These were memos and letters between Pope Benedict and his personal secretary. A lot would be brought to light about the finances of the Pope and the bribes that were taken by the Vatican from people who wanted an audience with him. An extensive corruption scheme was also unraveled in the letters from Archbishop Carlo Maria Viggiano. It was found that the Holy See had lost millions of dollars in inflated contract prices. These documents exposed the power struggles in the Vatican and the city turned out to be a hotspot of envy, political scheming, and factional fighting. There was also a document that would reveal that Cardinal Paolo Romeo predicted that the Pope would be dead within 12 hours. Besides the financial discrepancies and the professional enmity, these Vatican leaks also uncovered a scandal involving the homosexual clergy members. They were apparently being blackmailed by outsiders. The main reason why these leaked documents caused such a frenzy was that the information in them was actually pretty accurate. Though Pope Benedict refuted these claims and called them exaggerated rumors, an urgent meeting of all the high officials of the Vatican would be called, and after a few months of investigation, 2 Vatican aides were found guilty of leaking it out. One of them was Paolo Gabriel, the personal butler of Pope Benedict, while the other was a computer specialist at the Secretariat of State. The damage that these 2 men caused to the reputation of the Vatican was monumental, but despite that, the Pope did pardon them. Number 8. Vatican obelisk was stolen. Who doesn't know about the giant obelisk standing erect in the center of St. Peter's Square? If you take a closer look at it, it looks exactly like the ones that are found in Egypt. Well, this one is also Egyptian, and it was stolen from Egypt by the ancient Romans. It's quite ironic that they displayed a stolen obelisk in the very center of the Vatican. This one is around 4,500 years old, meaning that it's 1,500 years older than the city of Rome. It's also called Caligula's obelisk, as Caligula took it from Alexandria back in 37 AD. He wanted to place it in the Circus Caligula, also known as the Circus of Nero, where chariot races and many executions took place. This is where the first poor St. Peter would be crucified upside down in 64 AD. The obelisk was later moved to its current location, and it's the only one that's still standing since the ancient Roman times. A lot is not known about the obelisk, but experts don't even know which pharaoh even ordered its construction. Many have stated that it's quite unsettling that a stolen relic has been made a signature monument in the city of Christianity. Number 9. Jesus was married. It's no secret that the world knows a lot about the death of Jesus, but there's hardly any information about his life. For a few decades now, there have been rumors that he lived his life like any ordinary man. There's allegedly textual evidence proving that Jesus was actually married to Mary Magdalene. This manuscript is from the 6th century and was originally written in ancient Syriac but then translated into Greek. While the translation was underway, the story of Jesus Christ marrying Mary Magdalene would be discovered. This hasn't been mentioned in the Bible. There are detailed accounts about his birth and death, but very little known is about the 30 years that he was alive. The manuscript is called The Lost Gospel, and it portrays Jesus as a normal person who fell in love, married Mary Magdalene, and had children with her. This was not taken lightly by the church, as it's quite a controversial find, but many think that the manuscript is not a reliable source. It is a real book from the British Library, but no one knows where it came from, when it was written, or who even wrote it. The Lost Gospel also says that Mary Magdalene was the daughter of God and a co-redeemer of humanity. The manuscript emphasizes that she may have been equally important as Jesus, but that surely is an unacceptable insight for the Vatican, and they've worked really hard to present Jesus as a powerful almighty God. Number 10. The Secret Court. The Catholic justice system has a mind of its own. Certain crimes are deemed extremely bad by the Vatican, and to investigate these crimes, they have a special court. This elite squad of bishops tries the people accused of these heinous crimes, and the panel is called the Apostolic Penitentiary, or the Tribunal of Conscience. It was founded by Pope Alexander III back in 1179, but up until 2009, no one even knew the court existed. The tribunal hears cases about sins that are so terrible that only the Pope can pardon the perpetrators. Regular priests can deal with crimes like genocide, so this means that crimes that go before the Pope must be even worse. Well, not necessarily though. The crimes that can lead you to be tried by the Apostolic Penitentiary include trying to assassinate the Pope, exposing the identity or the sin of someone who confessed, priests engaging in sexual activity, abortions, and more. Strangely, spitting out a communion wafer is also considered an act worthy of trial by this tribunal. The Pope acts as the head of the panel, and he's the only one who can grant absolution. The cases in this court are heard privately under fake credentials to protect the identity of the accused, and because the church believes it's a matter of conscience. No one knows what kind of crimes or criminals have been before this tribunal, and whether or not they were punished or pardoned. Number 11. Transcripts from Knights of Templar. Among the secret documents held in the Vatican's archives, there's a yellowed parchment with a neat black script that bears answers to many questions asked by historians. It is the official court documents that reveal the details of the infamous 14th century trials of the Knights of Templar on the suspicions of heresy. This order of Christian warriors traces its beginnings to the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem, when 9 knights were given the task of protecting pilgrims on the roads of Jerusalem under the auspices of King Baldwin II and the Patriarch Warmund. The order of the warriors was persecuted by King Philip IV of France, who was suspicious of their growing wealth and influence. Pope Clement was the one to initiate an investigation, sending out many knights to trial. Some would be eventually pardoned by the Pope, and the full name of the order was Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. Now, the Knights had become an elite fighting force in the Crusades and were known for their propensity not to retreat or surrender. It was their rules of secrecy, their privilege, power, and wealth that all led to the king accusing them. This eventually led to their destruction. The Templar leader, Master Jacques de Mello, was arrested on charge of heresy in 1307, and in France, many of these knights, along with their leader, were burned at the stake, while others were sentenced to perpetual imprisonment. Similar trials would be held in many different places after France, which included England, Scotland, Ireland, Germany, Spain, and Cyprus, but their outcomes were a little less horrifying. Number 12. Child abuse. The Catholic Church has been bombarded with thousands of sexual abuse allegations in the past few years, from towns in the Australian countryside to schools in Ireland and multiple cities in America and Canada. Allegations of heinous crimes have been pooling in against the clergy members. The allegations first surfaced in the United States in 1980s, but the worst cases were reported from Ireland and Austria in the 1990s. Back then, the church had no policy to protect and ensure the well-being of children. No one was even required to report crimes against children to the church. The leaders have been issuing apologies for years now. The Boston Globe, a newspaper from the United States, would expose the child abuse and urge victims to speak up. Between the year 2000 and 2010, the U.S. diocese had to make numerous settlements with abuse victims. In 1995, the Archbishop of Vienna had to step down because of these allegations. The newspaper also revealed that instead of holding the accused perpetrators accountable, the church began moving them around. A church-commissioned report issued in 2004 revealed that at least 4,000 priests had been accused of sexual misconduct in the past 50 years. They had abused tens of thousands of victims, most of whom would be young boys. Pope Francis promised in 2019 that the abusers would receive due punishment, and he even held an unprecedented summit on pedophilia in the church and changed the laws to criminalize sexual abuse, but that doesn't mean the cover-ups have stopped. A recent inquiry has revealed that about 216,000 children in France have suffered abuse at the hand of clergy members since the 1950s. Most people think that the Vatican's stance against the abuse of children is merely a stance, and the Sacred City has failed to take any solid action against the criminal clergy members. Number 13. Aliens. Back in the 17th century, some documents from the Vatican Library were closed to outsiders under the order of Pope Paul V. It wasn't until 1881 that researchers gained access to these again, and among all the speculations was a faint rumor that these documents might hold evidence of extraterrestrial life and its interaction with the church. A Russian professor allegedly gained access to the archives, and the documents contained nearly 12 centuries worth of Europe's history. While he was checking them out, he came across some things that looked kind of fishy. There were papers that described aliens and how they had influenced and interacted with ancient civilizations. The papers also revealed that almost all civilizations have had their fair share of contact with extraterrestrials, especially the Egyptians and the Mayans. The professor also claimed that he found records of incredibly powerful weaponry that was used by the ancient people. One text supposedly revealed that the walls of Babylon were melted using a weapon that emanated unbelievable amounts of heat and energy, almost like the modern nuclear bomb. While these are just claims, and the professor never managed to provide any evidence, it is exciting to assume that our ancestors may have been in contact with aliens. The Vatican, however, will never reveal whether or not these records do exist. Number 14. Pope Joan. The stories of a female pope have been around for quite a while now, but no one can say for sure whether these are accurate or not. Pope Joan was a woman who allegedly ruled the Vatican as a pope for a few years during the Middle Ages. She would become famous in the 13th century when her tales spread throughout the continent. For many centuries it was believed to be true, but the scholars now think that the story was actually fake. Pope Joan has been described as an incredibly talented woman who entered the church by disguising herself as a man. Because she was smart, Pope Joan rose amongst the ranks quite rapidly and then was soon declared the Pope. No one knew that she was a woman until one day she ended up in labor during a procession, and she reportedly died after the delivery. So far, historians do not know whether or not she was killed or just died of natural causes, and the church processions began avoiding the spot where she gave birth, and eventually the Vatican removed her from the official list of popes. They also established a ritual to ensure that whoever became pope in the future was definitely male. According to Martin of Opava, her real name was Joan Anglicus of Mainz, and she actually entered the church because of her lover, but the 16th century Catholic and Protestant writers think that she was just a fictional character. Number 15. The chronovisor. The chronovisor is supposedly a device that gives its user the ability to see through time. Between the 1960s and 1990, Father Pellegrino Ernetti claimed that he assisted in the invention of a sort of time machine called the chronovisor. He reportedly used it to look back in time and see the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The existence of this time machine has not been proven so far, but in 2002, a book would be written by priest Father Francois Brunet, who revealed quite a lot about it. According to the book, Father Ernetti was a Benedictine monk, and he allegedly kept the device a secret until the early 1960s. It was during the 60s that he confided in Brunet and told him how 12 scientists, including Enrico Fermi and Werner von Braun, who was a former Nazi, helped to build the game-changing machine. It's said to be made of cathode rays, antenna, and metals that received sound and light on almost all wavelengths. The chronovisor allowed the team of scientists to document events of the past, and they believed that this machine could help them to validate the teachings of the Bible. Brunet wrote that Ernetti told him the device had several antennae, 3 of which were made of mysterious metals, and there was also a direction finder that tuned into the era that one wanted to see. A screen showed the desired event, while a recording device recorded the footage. It was more of a window into the past instead of a typical time machine. Ernetti recounted that he witnessed Marcus Tullius Cicero's speech to the Roman Senate in 63 BC, and besides that, he also saw the founding of the Roman Empire, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and many other biblical events. Until he died, Ernetti did maintain his stance on the existence of the chronovisor, and that it had been hidden away in the Vatican for safeguarding. The people who brought this device to the light are long dead, but the mystery that surrounds it still persists as the Vatican is quite tight-lipped on the matter, and there hasn't been any solid evidence to support the claims. Could the chronovisor be real? Well, if it is, then why is it being kept a secret? Tell us what you think in the comments down below.